Chainsaw Man. You've most certainly heard of it and seen the gorgeous new anime trailer. You might have even already read the manga and delved deeper into the works of this complete psychopath that is Fujimotologist. But what if I told you that even this doesn't come close to what there is to know about the series and its creator? Well, that's why I'm here to cover this Chainsaw Man Iceberg chart made by me, actually. Yeah, usually these kinds of videos cover charts made by other people, but since there was no Chainsaw Man Iceberg out there, at least from what I could find, I just decided to do it myself. And after some research, a few revisions, and some recommendations from other users on Reddit, I've been able to compile multiple theories, memes, fun facts, and some other wacky shit into 6 layers of absolute degeneracy, ranging from the most basic knowledge all the way to some things that even I didn't know until making this video. But without further ado, grab some popcorn, your Pochita plush, and a dog collar, and let's just jump right in. Makima Simps. To start things off, we have one of the most infamous things about Chainsaw Man and its fanbase. And that's the absolute ridiculous amount of people online barking for this red-haired lady in a suit. It's on Twitter, it's on YouTube, it's on Reddit. It's absolutely everywhere, and it's both the most embarrassing and hilarious thing I've seen. Power. Probably one of the most popular characters in Chainsaw Man, and a fan favorite. Power is a character you'll most likely see included in the normie waifu tier list, cosplayed at cons, and as profile pictures on Twitter. Pochita. Another one of the most popular Chainsaw Man characters, pretty much serving as the mascot for the franchise, being plastered in a bunch of merch. He's also perfect emote material. Kobeni memes. Kobeni. The one character that has been memed to death even more than the others. After all, even Fujimoto is memed on her a bunch. That's pretty much the point of her character, and it's great. With that, we finish this pretty brief first layer. I only really include a bit of the most well-known info here, since it's all pretty rudimentary, and the more interesting entries are all after this, so let's just move right into that with layer 2. Tatsuki Fujimoto, creator of Chainsaw Man, as well as some other projects like Fire Punch and a few one-shots, Tatsuki Fujimoto is definitely seen as one of the most inventive and unique mangaka of the current generation, with some even saying he's on track to becoming the next GOAT of manga like Hisomu Urasawa. And honestly, considering how great all of his works are, I'm all for that. Studio Mappa. They're by far one of the most popular studios in anime currently, being the ones behind stuff like Jujutsu Kaisen and Attack on Titan final season. In 2020, it was announced they'd be working on the anime for Chainsaw Man, and from the stuff we've seen, those being from the pre-animated PV from 2021, and the full-on trailer from this year, it looks beautiful. Look Back and Goodbye Eri. This refers to some of the one-shots I mentioned earlier, although some might even doubt calling them one-shots considering how long they are, with Look Back being around 150 pages, and Goodbye Eri a full-on 200. Aside from that, these one-shots have been praised by the community, and they're definitely worth checking out. Also, Look Back is releasing physically in English this September, so I'd definitely recommend picking that up once it's out. Part 2. Chainsaw Man, similarly to other manga like JoJo's, is separated into various parts, with each one focusing on a different protagonist, although that could be a subject to change for Chainsaw Man since part 2 has only begun, having 5 chapters as of writing the script. As far as we know, however, the manga could go back to being about Denji and instead serve as a Naruto-style part 2, with a time skip and change of themes, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Jump Plus. This is the online equivalent of Shonen Jump, featuring series like Hell's Paradise, Spy X Family, and Fujimoto's previous work Fire Punch. And with part 2 of the manga ongoing right now, it switched from Shonen Jump, where all of part 1 is serialized, to here. Axe. Now here's one of the more wacky entries. On the 24th of March of this year, the official Axe Twitter account made this tweet, with a parody of the Chainsaw Man Volume 1 cover, but with an Axe can. And of course, everyone went fucking crazy. But honestly, this is definitely not the strangest instance of a Chainsaw Man reference out there. Just look at the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense. Yes, this is real. Chainsaw Man pacing. Let's be honest here, the pacing in the manga is absolutely insane, and the internet has definitely caught wind of that. Just think about it. All the fights go by in a flash, and part 1 was able to create a fully fledged story in only 97 chapters, while a series by a different author would have probably taken way longer to do so. Couple this with the general insanity of Fujimoto's writing, and it makes all his works a blast to read through. Here's to hope the anime is able to capture that frantic speed. Seinen-like. This is an argument often brought up about not just Chainsaw Man, but also some similar series like Hell's Paradise, Attack on Titan, and Jujutsu Kaisen. And in short, it basically just refers to how all of these series take themes and characters that you would usually see in a seinen series and rework them into a shonen framework. And while on that note, Fire Punch is also technically a shonen, despite it being nothing like one. What a weird world we live in. Comparisons to Jujutsu Kaisen. Following up on the last entry, the seinen feel of both Chainsaw Man and JJK is far from being one of the only similarities between these two, with many aspects such as the main trio, devils/curses, rough and sketchy art style, overpowered mentor character, and far more being very similar between the two. Although some of these are probably intentional, as Fujimoto and Akutami Gege, the creator of JJK, have often collaborated and balanced ideas of each other. And that's a wrap for the second layer. Way more interesting stuff to talk about than last time, but this is all still normie shit. We still have a lot to look into, so on to layer 3 we go. Film references. Now we're starting to get into some of the stuff that full-on Chainsaw Man fans know about, with the most surface level of these being the countless film references in Fujimoto's works. A lot of his manga have derived a lot from cinema, so much that I'm not even gonna attempt to list them all out in this video, but I'd still recommend searching for some of them yourself. It's really awesome to see how Fujimoto's not just very cultured in movie taste, of course, but also how he's able to integrate all of this influence into his works almost seamlessly, with the most extreme example being Goodbye Eri, which feels like a whole goddamn short film. Buddy Stories. This is an official light novel featuring some side stories set in the Chainsaw Man universe. I haven't personally taken the time to read it yet, but the art that Fujimoto did for this looks great and has decent reviews, so I'd probably recommend it if you want more Chainsaw Man. You just like me for real. Now here's a fun one. This is an edit of a page from chapter 93 that's been spread around the internet like wildfire. I wasn't able to find where this edit was first posted, since every time I tried to Google the origin of this meme, it just showed me the original page from chapter 93, and it's already cemented itself as part of the community, so who cares. Chainsaw Man takes place in 1997. This one will probably seem obvious for someone like me who has reread the manga multiple times, but I wouldn't really call it common knowledge that Chainsaw Man isn't set in modern day, but instead in the year 1997. This isn't really noticeable right off the bat. You're not going to see anyone playing a PS1 or a poster of Titanic in the background, but there are a couple points in the manga that state the year. Power's inconsistent color palette. Now this entry mainly refers to two different things. In the manga's colored artwork, there are certain points where Power's jacket color randomly switches between red and blue. And although the anime seems to be making an effort to rectify this, they've also gone ahead and changed Power's hair color from pink to standard blonde. This has probably led to confusing a lot of people, but it's not really a big deal anyway. If anything, it's even better to have so much color variety in your characters. Just look at JoJo's for example. Dennis. This actually comes from a mistranslation of the name Denji. Although this isn't from a bad scanlation of the series, that era is long over. Rather, it's from Google's autocorrect, and the memeier sides of the community have definitely taken liking to this name. Kobeni's car. On the topic of stupid memes, we have the certified best character in Chainsaw Man, beloved by critics and fans alike. It's the one and only Kobeni's car. At first, the memes were tame with that one scene where Power runs Denji over with a titular vehicle, But it wasn't until the official Chainsaw Man 2020 character popularity poll where Kobeni's car ranked higher than Kobeni's car owner, and all hell broke loose. Hell astronaut memes. This one comes from a panel in chapter 64, which I won't go too in-depth into for spoilers, but long story short, some really weird shit happens and a bunch of characters are met with this terrifying visage. Of course, with these being astronauts and Among Us being a thing, for better and for worse, we got an Among Us edit of this very panel, which led to a bunch of other edits.
Naito one-shot. Now for another one of Fujimoto's one-shots, this one being 2015's Yoken no Nayuta, or Nayuta of the Prophecy, which centers around a regular old Japanese dude whose sister is prophesied to bring out the end of the world. This one-shot would later become the namesake for Nayuta at the end of Chainsaw Man Part 1.
CGI Devils. Circling back to MAPPA, we have one of their most controversial aspects, their CGI. And by that I just mean AOT Final Season Part 1, because that's literally the only case where it was shit, and even then it was because of horrible work schedules. But anime fans being anime fans, it's completely overblown, and now all CGI in any MAPPA anime means disaster. Although taking a look at the trailer released recently, as well as the work conditions and staff behind the project this time, it's safe to say it's nothing to worry about. Fujimoto's Twitter. So there's this Japanese Twitter account out there, and at first glance it's really nothing too special. Just someone talking about everyday events and what they've read recently. Well, it turns out that this isn't just some random account, but in fact Fujimoto himself, role-playing as a little girl, for some reason. Like, at this point I legit can't tell if this man is a weirdo or an absolute genius. Either way, that's the end of the third layer. Definitely more to talk about this time, and now we're halfway through the entire thing, actually. Although I should probably take the time to mention that there's several entries from this point forward that include spoilers for the Chainsaw Man manga up to chapter 103. So if you haven't caught up yet, then proceed with caution. But taking into account how far we've gone so far, I think it's time for a small break. So if you haven't done so yet, I recommend going for some snacks and a blanket and getting cozy because oh boy, we've only scratched the surface of this iceberg.
References to other manga and anime. Now, while Fujimoto might be a big cinema fan, that doesn't mean he hasn't taken any inspiration from works in his own industry. Some of the more notable references are this devil being inspired by a Junji Ito monster, and the Easy Revenge cigarette given to Aki being a Fully Cooley reference. Although there's way more than that, but just like last time, it would take too long to list them all out, so I'd recommend researching that yourself. Darkness Devil spells out Makima's name. Going back to the same scene from the Hell Astronaut Century, there's some theories that say that in the scene where Darkness Devil attacks everyone, the severed arms spell out Makima's name. Now while this might sound like an absurd conspiracy theory, there's at least some evidence behind this one, such as the same scene using the severed arms in other creative ways, such as using them to divide panels, and the fact that Makima comes in later on in this very scene to fight the Darkness Devil. Of course, with the meme potential that any text-based template can generate, we got Darkness Devil arm edits. The name pretty much explains itself, really. It's basically just the scene I showed previously, but with the arms now spelling out funny things. Quan Chi and Kashibi Extra Chapter. Most of the volume releases of Chainsaw Man include a short omake, or in other words, a short 4-coma-like strip at the very end of each volume. Sometimes they're connected to the events of the volume, other times they're character introductions, as well as some other miscellaneous stuff. They're a really neat addition and I like them. Now as for what this entry is referring to, it's the extra chapter featured in volume 8, titled Let's Learn About Kishibe. It shows Kishibe's relation with Quanchi during the first few years they worked together. It's mainly just there for comedic purposes, but with how popular of a character Kishibe already is, this omake in particular became one of the most popular from Chainsaw Man, and has led to a lot of fan art. Banana ranking. In Weekly Shonen Jump, each issue has a little author's note right after a chapter of said author's series. A lot of the time, they just comment about things from their everyday lives. Although they sometimes also talk about their manga or other thoughts and stuff floating around in their heads. Now with Fujimoto being the peculiar individual that he is, he's made some pretty wacky author's notes, with one of the most infamous ones being from chapter 22, where he ranks brown bananas over regular bananas. I would usually be mauling at the thought of someone liking the brown spots in a banana, but this is Fujimoto, this is pretty much in character for him. Yuko and Kusakabe are related. This one relates to the new character Yuko introduced at the end of chapter 99. And since we haven't gotten much info on her, even up to the most recent chapter she's appeared in, a lot of people have resorted to theorizing about her backstory and connection to other characters, more specifically Kusakabe, the user of the Stone Devil during the International Assassins arc. This one really just comes from the fact that they look similar, but I guess it'll stick around until she gets more development. Fujimoto can levitate. This one relates to a YouTube video titled Chainsaw Man Author Tries to Levitate, which shows the one and only real Fujimoto Tatsuki in one of his many levitation training sessions, with this being one of his first ones, explaining his failure. Although rest assured, it is said that now he has mastered the skill for a while now. Bonesaw Guy. I don't know much about My Hero Academia, but from what I researched, in chapter 259 of the manga, there's this splash page of a bunch of characters, and among the crowd is none other than Denji. But thanks to copyright stuff or whatever, they had to replace him with a bootleg in the anime version of this scene. Instead of being regular old Chainsaw Man, now he has a blue suit, doll-like joints, and bone saws in his head and arms instead of chainsaws. Hence the name Bonesaw Guy. Denji's mother. Although Denji's father has been shown during the Control Devil arc, there hasn't really been any mention or acknowledgement of his mother after chapter 1, where it's stated that she died from a disease. This could simply be because Fujimoto didn't really see the point in adding more depth to her and Denji's backstory, more than he needed to. But this could also just be him saving that plot point for later. We'll also be coming to that one later on. Kobeni's Devil Contract. Throughout part 1, we've been shown a lot of devils that different devil hunters have contracted, such as Himeno and the Ghost Devil, Kusakabe and the Stone Devil, as well as many people who have contracted with the Fox Devil. But one character who hasn't shown their ability yet is Kobeni. The main reason is that she doesn't really get any opportunity to fight, and by that I mean she really doesn't want to, as the only real fight she's in, that I can recall at least, was against Snake Girl in the Katana Man arc, and even in her introduction, she keeps her contract a secret. Considering that she's one of the few characters who actually survived part 1, there's a very big chance that she'll come back in part 2, whether that's voluntarily or not, and use her contracted devil. Aki was destined to become the Gun Fiend. Despite this only happening late in the manga during the Gun Devil arc, around volume 9, there's actually a lot of foreshadowing to Aki's fate. From a lot of the dialogue from the future devil, to his entire design, as Fujimoto has stated that the top knot on the top of his head, that's pretty much the main trademark from his character design, is meant to represent the firing hammer of a handgun. Fujimoto's assistants. Like many other mangaka, Fujimoto has had many assistants throughout the years. For those of you who are unacquainted, assistants are basically there to help out mangakas with stuff like backgrounds, characters that are out of focus, and other details in order to get the chapter finished in time. I'm mainly bringing this up since a lot of rookie mangakas start off as assistants for other creators, and then go on to become successful in their own right. This has been especially prevalent for Fujimoto, as he has been assisted by Kakuyuji, Tatsu Yukinobu, and Endo Tatsuya, the creators of Hell's Paradise, Dan Dan Dan, and Spy Family respectively. Fujimoto's other one-shots. Back to Fujimoto himself. This is referring to a lot of his other one-shots that he has made between 2011 and 2014 that kickstarted his career. As far as I'm aware, most, if not all of these previous works, including the previously mentioned Naruto one-shot, have been compiled into 2 volume releases that will soon be released in English by Viz Media under the title Tatsuki Fujimoto Before Chainsaw Man. So if you're a fan of his works and want to see how he started off, then I definitely recommend picking those up. I swear this is not an ad. But anyways, that was the 4th layer. I was finally able to sprinkle in some theories now that I don't have to avoid spoilers, and I definitely think this is also where I was able to put out some of the more interesting fun facts. Anyways, now on to layer 5. Denji and Aki early designs. On March 2022, there was a Fujimoto Tatsuki exhibit held in this city in France, showcasing a lot of his artwork, colored illustrations, and even some never-before-seen material from the creation and brainstorming phase of Chainsaw Man, so around the middle of 2018. 2 of these pieces showcased early designs for Denshi, Aki, and Makima. And although Makima looks pretty similar to her final design, although with a bit more of a Fire Punch-esque look to it, Denji and Aki have some of the most interesting changes. With Denji, Fujimoto was playing around with the idea of having regular old black hair and maybe also short hair, as seen from this image. Honestly, I'm glad that Fujimoto went with his current design. God knows we don't need another bland, black-haired Kirito bootleg roaming around in the industry. And as for Aki, he's by far the character with the most changes. Instead of his top-knot hair that we all recognize, he was an ultra-tall emo boy with a Levi haircut. And although I still prefer his final design, as I feel it fits his character better, this look isn't too bad either. It's even had some fan art of its own. Overall, I find it really fun to look at early concept art for characters in popular manga, as well as other media like video games and movies. I really hope we get to see what other characters like Power look like in the concept stage. Just listen to the song as a metaphor for Chainsaw Man. This one shot by Fujimoto is actually pretty unique compared to his other works, mainly because it wasn't even drawn by him, although it still looks very similar to his art style, yet again because it was made by another one of his assistants. But another thing about the story is that it seems to be a metaphor for Chainsaw Man fans, and the reception of the series by the anime community. After all, it shows a song on YouTube blowing up and people endlessly picking it apart and making ridiculous theories about it, when in reality, it was just about an experience the protagonist had in middle school, which made his second song fail as it tried to deliver the message as plainly as possible. It's definitely possible that this was a sort of indirect message from Fujimoto to his fans that part 2 of Chainsaw Man might not be exactly what they expected, especially considering that this very one-shot came out only a few days before Chapter 98 of Chainsaw Man came out, and so far, Part 2 has definitely taken a unique direction to its storytelling compared to Part 1, with it being more slowly paced and taking its time on a lot of scenes. Unfortunately, it seems like this one-shot is quickly forgotten and people didn't get his message, as people instantly started begging for Denji to return every time a new chapter came out. I really hope that this wasn't the reason he returned so soon. Although Fujimoto doesn't really seem to be the type to fall into his fans' demands. That could always be the case, and I fear the consequences that might have on his career and works. Aldo in Part 2. For those of you who don't remember, Aldo was the youngest of the 3 American brothers from the International Assassins arc, as well as the only one who didn't die in an extremely graphic manner. And although he was shown to be under the effects of Cosmo's ability, some people say that he could have just been playing along, and that he might come back in Part 2 and have a revenge arc. But honestly, despite having some scenes dedicated to him and his motivations, I don't really see how or why Fujimoto would bring him back at the current moment. Would be cool though. JoJo reference? In Chapter 29, right after the first fight against Katana Man, There's a scene of Aki in the hospital with Power and Denji by his side reading a book. Due to how the characters on the spine and cover of the book seem to spell JoJo, many people have assumed that this is a JoJo reference. But considering how Fujimoto has never really stated anything about JoJo or Araki influencing his works, comparing this to other manga and anime references in CSM, and the fact that the logo for JoJo's in Japan is completely different, I don't really think it's likely. Rather, I believe this is a reference to Koto Koto magazine, a manga magazine aimed at young kids. Considering that Fujimoto's love for manga dates back to his early days, it's likely that he read a fair bit of this magazine as a kid, as well as the fact that it being aimed at kids means that it has simpler dialogue, meaning that this could be yet another nod at the fact that Denji is illiterate. Mike the Headless Chicken. Before the release of Chapter 98, we got a teaser image of Asa and Bucky to promote Chainsaw Man Part 2, and since this image is all we had back then, a lot of theories rose to prominence. One of them being that the chicken that we now know as Bucky was a reference to the real-life animal named Mike the Headless Chicken, a famous chicken from 1940s America who survived for 18 months after having its head chopped off. He even has his own national holiday. Considering the fact that this is a very famous phenomenon, there's a chance that Fujimoto was inspired by this and designed Bucky after it. But there's not much really to prove this. Chainsaw Man author sings his favorite food. Another one of these YouTube videos that were supposedly made by Fujimoto himself. This one's just a song he wrote about milk or something. Look, I'm not Nihongo Jozu enough to comprehend all the lyrics, so I'm trusting the subtitles on this one. Here's a snippet of this platinum hit single.
好きな牛乳メグミルク好きな生クリーム生クリーム好きなアイスソフトクリーム僕は生きてる
Makima with a katana in Chapter 1 prototype. Another entry relating to the exhibit in France. This one relates to an early sketch of a panel from Chainsaw Man Chapter 1. More specifically, one from right around the end of where Makima finds Denji. While in the final version, she's barehanded with only the two bodyguards by her side. In the prototype of this page, she seems to be holding a katana. There's a chance that maybe earlier on in Chainsaw Man's development, every devil hunter would have been issued a weapon instead of a devil contract. Or perhaps devil contracts would be harnessed into weapons. Or maybe Fujimoto just thought this would look cool. Regardless, this is yet another mystery from early Chainsaw Man that we might never get an answer to. Aki in the list of Gun Devil casualties. This one is definitely very easy to miss. After all, who would even go through the pain of reading every single name in this long ass list? But Aki is actually listed out there. Of course, we're already shown that he's killed and turned to the gun fiend later on, but this is still a very nice detail. Also, the author of Golden Kamui is there too, for some reason. Yuko is Denji. Another theory relating to Yuko and her past, this one says that Yuko is actually Denji in disguise, to try and hide his identity as Chainsaw Man or something. Yet again, this is just another theory based on appearance, and we were already shown Denji and Yuko in the same panel as different people in Chapter 102, so that pretty much puts this theory to rest. Makima's true age. As we're already shown in Part 1, Makima is actually a devil with a very human appearance, and we're also told that she witnessed Chainsaw Man eat nuclear weapons in World War II devils, which means she has existed as Makima at least since the 1940s. Of course, devils are often killed in the human world and then returned after being in hell for a bit, so technically the Control Devil has existed as long as the Fear of Control itself. But we're never told when this specific incarnation of the Control Devil, that being Makima, has existed. With Naita already being a toddler with the ability to speak and form memories, despite being discovered by Kishibe only a few months after Makima's death, we can conclude that the Control Devil doesn't really go through the same development process as a regular human baby, which means that she could have been reincarnated very close to Chainsaw Man erasing these devils. So that at the very least leaves us with Makima being at the very least in her 50s during Part 1, taking into account it takes place in 1997. Although with Makima already having died, with the focus of the story shifting away from her, we probably won't get a definitive answer, at least in the manga itself. Hybrids don't age. As we've been shown with Quanchi, hybrids seemingly stop aging after they have acquired their ability, as Quanchi has basically looked the same even as far back as when she started working with Kishibe, so some 50 or 60 years before the main story. And it's hinted that it might even go further back than that, as she's often referred to as the first devil hunter, and considering how she has the ability of the crossbow devil, her origins might date back multiple decades, if not centuries. This pretty much means that any other hybrids like Reze could also be way older than they appear, although with her case, she is at the very least younger than Quanchi, as she was a human experiment by the Soviet Union, which was founded in 1917, and bombs, at least the specific design of bombs present in her design, are very recent, so she's probably around 70 to 80 years old at most. But still, to think that Denji might have fallen in love with two old women is kind of uncomfortable. But considering how Denji is, he probably wouldn't care as long as he got laid. Good old Denji. Makima is based on a real person. Yet another entry on Makima. Although this one isn't about the plot of Chainsaw Man, but instead one of Fujimoto's real-life experiences that would inspire her character. That being an instance where he is riding a bike and some random girl made him fall over. But with how Fujimoto is, he liked it for some reason, and he used that experience to write Makima's character. Arai's violence fiend. Now this is by far one of the more popular theories out there, and it relates to Arai, a member of Special Division 4 who appeared in the Infinity Devil and Katana Man arcs, and the Violence Fiend who appeared in the second half of Katana Man up to his death in hell during International Assassins, and how they're theorized to actually be the same person. There's actually a lot to back this one up, believe it or not, such as the fact when a Violence Fiend's mask is destroyed, his face and hair look very similar to Arai, and how close they both are with Kobeni, with both of them even dying while protecting her. Censored smoking in Goodbye Eri. Back to some other of Fujimoto's works that aren't Chainsaw Man. There's some speculation that in the original version of Eri's introduction, she was actually smoking based on where she is and how her hand is positioned, almost like she's holding a cigarette. But then Fujimoto was forced to remove it for whatever reason. Although the theory has at least some logic behind it, I really don't see why Fujimoto would remove this by force. If I had to guess, he might have just removed it since he backed down and thought that depicting a teenager smoking would be a bad idea. But maybe he thought it would make Eri's later reveal as a vampire a bit more obvious, but oh well. There we go, that's the fifth layer. This is definitely where I really started to discover some really obscure stuff that even I didn't know about beforehand. And I even had a lot of entries that I might have over-elaborated on. But I guess in an iceberg, the more information the better. Now we're only missing the sixth and final layer, so let's not waste any more time and dive into the bottom of this. Lost one-shots. Remember when I said that the Tatsuki Fujimoto Before Chainsaw Man volumes compile most of his earlier one-shots? Well, that's because there's actually some lost one-shots of his out there that have never been uploaded online. While there's probably more out there that we know absolutely nothing about, the two that we do have at least some info on are Paper Planes and Sense of Justice, both from 2013. According to this Reddit post, these two are listed in Fujimoto's author bio in fandom.com, and so far we only have a single screenshot from both of these. This post was made 2 years ago, and from what I've seen, there's been little progress since, but here's to hope we can find these someday. Fire Punch and Chainsaw Man are set in the same universe. This kind of theory exists for every group of series made by the same creator, such as with Shinshiro Watanabe, the creator of Cowboy Bebop, Space Dandy, and Carol and Tuesday. But there is actually some interesting nods to Fire Punch and Chainsaw Man that are at least worth pointing out, such as Kobeni sharing the same moles on her face as Togata, or more directly, a Fire Punch poster/ad appearing in Times Square when the US president summons the Gun Devil. This is pretty bland evidence, sure, but it's definitely worth pointing out at the very least. Yoshida's relatives died in Gun Devil attack. Returning to the giant list of deaths from the Gun Devil attack, aside from the obvious inclusion of Aki in there, there's actually 2 people listed in there with the family name Yoshida, those being Yoshida Toshi and Yoshida Yudai, the exact same surname as the Octopus Devil user from International Assassins. And taking into account that Yoshida will seemingly have a larger role in part 2, there's a chance that this little detail will be brought up. Reze and Darkness Devil are connected. During Reze's introduction in chapter 40, she's shown wearing a shirt with a belt print on it, a belt that's very similar in appearance to the one in Darkness Devil's sword. Be it because Fujimoto wanted to foreshadow that a bit, or perhaps Reze was planning to harness the Darkness Devil's power once she retrieved Denji's heart, we'll never know, but at least it's a really neat detail. But now, after all that we've talked about, it's time for the final theory. One that will most likely shock you to the core and completely reshape how you see the series. And that's... Makima is Denji's mom. This is it. The theory to end all theories. Why else would Denji's mom never be brought up? Because she's been there from the very start. Why else would Denji have such abnormal, almost devilish features like his sharp teeth? After all, we've never been told that humans can't have babies with devils or fiends. Why else would Makima know so much about the incident with Denji's father despite it occurring in a very small, almost unknown village? Because she witnessed it herself. The story about looking into the incident from archives was just a cover-up. That's right. At the end of the day, Chainsaw Man was never about the fights, or the comedy, or the characters, or even Kobani's car. No. All along, it was just a way for Fujimoto to express his crippling MILF obsession without being too vulgar about it. And that is why tomboys are back. Well, we did it. That's the entire Chainsaw Man Iceberg. I definitely had a lot of fun looking into a lot of the wackier entries and even discovering some new stuff I wouldn't have known about otherwise. And with the anime set to air this October, there's bound to be even more stuff that we discovered and added into a possible updated Iceberg. Although that also means that we're gonna have a bunch of people complaining about dumbass nonsense on Twitter and TikTok, as well as even more Makima simps than we ever thought was possible. But oh well, I guess that's just another footnote in anime history.